Hello, everybody. This is Preston Bolter here with Pocket Jacks Comics, and today I'm joined by it's Louis, right?
Yeah, just Louis
Louis.
Portner Jr.
Okay, because so some people might say Louis, but all right, Louis
Oh,
Porter.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Everyone, I mean, it's Louis. It's like, dude, just Louis. It's easy, simple.
yeah, I love it. So where are you out of?
Oh, I'm out of South Florida.
Okay, fantastic. I know I got a guy I'm working with, and actually there's a company, Absolute Comics, out of I want to say South Florida.
Okay.
So a fair number of the people I know kind of hail or work in and around that area. So it seems like there's a lot going on. Now I've been following your career for God, I want to say almost like a decade
Yeah,
now.
that sounds about right. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I remember I met you at a show where you had a booth and you were selling a game which reminded me of the first edition of Top Secret.
Yes, Haven City of Violence.
Right. Yes, Haven City of Violence.
Yeah,
And then
that was the classic. That got me started in this whole situation.
right. And God, I want to say, was that 20 years ago or something?
Yeah, it was.
Because in gaming terms, I remember it in terms of mechanics. I'm like, all right, that was before we went to everybody just had to do third edition in terms
Yeah,
of like the D20 system.
yeah.
So when did that happen? I'm like, oh, this had to be around 2000 then, somewhere
Yeah, we
around
start
there.
realizing how old you're like, wait, that's not right. Like, yeah, that was 2000. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
That was kind of a, you know, I always tell people I wanted to make Top Secret, and
mhm,
I love Top Secret. It's one of my favorite role playing games of all time.
right,
And we kind of did it with the game. And the one thing I really loved out of Top Secret was their hand to hand combat. I always said that was
yeah,
the best hand to hand combat ever made. It made realism, made sense,
right,
and I wanted to do an update for it. So I kind of built Haven off of that, and then I said, "Oh, we can do about crime because I like crime. I'm big. I was still big on crime, but
mhm,
huge, big neo noir fan of the early late '90s. A lot of early John Woo films, a lot of action films, and I said, "Oh,
mhm,
you could do that kind of stuff." And I got kind of started with that,
right,
and then I found out about well, back then it was RPG Now,
right,
and I made my first $50 the first month. And I'm
mhm,
like, this is the best thing ever. It can't
yeah,
get any better than this.
exactly.
Then it just got. Then after that, it just got crazy. And
Okay, so to tell me about Crazy, because I just that was my one connection with you. I just remembered that, and I just was always curious. And you, for me, have been like the bellwether for someone outside of the role playing games industry, just curious about it. I'm like, oh, I wonder what Louis Porter is doing, because like when I go and find out what you're doing, that tells me what indie publishers are doing. Like, oh, and I saw you kind of went with the D20 thing eventually, so you kind of converted Haven City Violence to that.
yeah, I
And
mean,
I'm going to say that probably helped your sales, right?
it did. It actually. It also helped me understand. Because initially, I was all like, "No, I want to be unique and I want it to be different." And then it came to me like, "Dude, do you want to make money or do you want to waste time?"
Right.
And I was like, okay, well then let me try out. So I tried out fantasy first, and fantasy was kind of okay. It always got okay sales, nothing great. But my first really big hit was when Mutants and Masterminds came out.
Mm-hmm.
And I love superheroes. I'm a comic book fan. I mean, you can see my stuff behind me. And I was like, hey, they don't have a book on powers. And one of my favorite books from the Marvel role playing game was the Ultimate Powers book.
Yeah.
And I talked to a buddy of mine. Well, I guess we hadn't really met that much at that time, Lee Hammock. And I said, hey, do you want to write a book for Mutants and Masterminds about superpowers? And he's like, yeah, that sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
And we literally put the first book out. Well, I can't even call it a book. It was the first PDF out.
Mm-hmm.
And in the first 24 hours, we sold 180 something copies.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, but then, and this is back in 2002.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like the early, or maybe 2003. This is like the early internet. It's like, holy cow. And what made it even weirder is like we were number one for like a day.
Mm-hmm.
And then Monty Cook released a product.
Mm-hmm.
And he went from like not even on the charts to like number 6 in like 4 hours, and then number 2 in like another 3 hours, and then like number 1 and bumped us down.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, back then we were like, well, how much does Monty sell? I wonder. And he was selling something for 3.0 at the time, And he probably made back then 400 sales in a couple days.
Right.
And just making hand over fist cash. And that's what it was back in the Wild West, as I call it. Because anything you did would sell, and you could do a lot of crazy things. And I describe it as there was more open hostility between companies and what people did. And I farmed up this space, so this is what I'm doing. So don't come over and do this. And people kind of like obeyed that for a little bit. But I think it was the moment, and I have to give credit where credit's due, even though personally I don't like this guy. I've always said that. Phil Reed coming up with the idea of actually charging less for PDFs and selling them was the moment of, oh my God, we could do that. Because before that, we were you had to spend $5 to check out back in the olden days.
Right.
And all the products were $5.
Right.
And he decided, well, I'm gonna make smaller products and charge, $1 or $2, and you can buy more.
Right.
And that really changed. I mean, it sounds silly, but that changed everything. And so, for the next couple of years, it was all kinds of just people getting into it and going around, and then 3.0 and then 3.5. And then Pathfinder came out. And actually Pathfinder and 4.0 came out kind of the same within a year, I think, of each other.
Right.
And Pathfinder was just a smarter idea. I always wondered why WotC decided to try to kill the OGL with 4.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, now we kind of know, right? Because when 5th edition came about, then Pathfinder sales started to slip and D&D sales started to rise again. So
right, and I'm okay with I always said I think Pathfinder was always going to be number 2 just because it's Dungeons and Dragons, and I get that. But at the same time, it was kind of like I believe when Pathfinder did their 2nd edition, that wasn't a good move for them. I know.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to have been popular at all, really.
Yeah,
And by the way, I was a hardcore Pathfinder guy.
Right, and there were a lot of people who loved it. I mean, even I, as a third-party publisher, loved it. But there was a change, from a publishing perspective, from a fan base perspective, and I think they tried to be too much like 5e. And also, I think Starfinder had an effect on their sales too. Which
why do you think that was?
I thought when Starfinder was going to come out, it was going to be actual sci-fi.
Right.
And it really became sci-fantasy.
Sci-fantasy, yes. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think back to something that I learned while talking to the guys who did Deadlands. The first Deadlands book, Westerns and Weird West, was a great seller. Then they started to do Dead on Earth, which was post-apocalyptic Western. And then they did sci-fi Western. The problem was they weren't getting more new people into the actual game playing. They were just cannibalizing their actual large fan base. And by the time they realized it was too late, they'd already messed it up. And, they'd lost a bunch of people because you can't have 3 different settings and tell people, hey, you got to buy all the stuff for all the settings all the time. And it's like, you've got to make divergent products.
Yes. I'm with you.
Yeah. But, I don't think that happened for Paizo. And I think Paizo's, because they're large enough, they can do well, but I don't think they've done as well as they wanted to. They said they've done well, but I'm just looking at I just know my sales on, products I've sold, and other people, I've seen more people jump to 5e.
Yes. I think they're going to slowly lose market share. I mean, I don't know how long. I mean, the weird thing is, when we're talking about, all right, the old school revivalists.
Yes.
And all right, so what do you think of that?
I think I understand the need for it, and I get it.
Okay.
Because some people want a classic look of stuff. They don't want things changed. I get change is not good for everybody.
The rejection of modernity and the return to the nostalgia of the 70s and 80s.
Right. And and I get it, but it's I think they've made I think gaming itself has made some good changes for the future. And I think they've done some good smart things to do.
Right.
But also at the same time, it's like the classic stuff is classic because it's classic, and we remember it as that.
Yes.
New kids don't always catch that connection. I mean, 5e plays, I think, let's say, closer to a video game.
Yes.
For them.
Yeah.
And that's not for me. I mean, 5e, I've made product, but I don't think it's like it isn't my go-to game. I like a system where you can really tweak as much as you need to. It's like, here's all the parts, you can make anything you want. And
So
point-based systems are great for that.
GURPS, like kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I would say Mutants and Masterminds is a great superhero game because it's all point-based. And if you want balance, well, here's the points.
Right.
These points equaled up to this. We've all agreed to them. I don't care if it says it's right or wrong, but we've all agreed this is what it equals. That's great. And like most role-playing fantasy stuff, you can't really do that. It's more randomness, and you need, this, and it's like, well, how do you balance this versus that? And it's, as long as perceived balance, I think everyone's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But the balance has to actually be perceived.
Yeah, otherwise, when everybody stands up, somebody might go, "Well, I didn't have fun at all."
Yeah, and you don't want that.
I, as a Pathfinder society GM, I'll go ahead and share my story. In the Los Angeles area from the 2000s forward. Well, no, I mean, so Pathfinder would be specifically in like the last 8 years, I want to say.
Right.
But there were society games, and I was a society GM. It was something I would do with my daughter, and I felt that the game wasn't exactly balanced. And if you were sitting around and power gaming it, as most of the society players no doubt were, because it kind of becomes its own little culture and talking about the build.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the real thing. When you got to third edition, now it was no longer about characters as much as it was about builds. And third edition, you didn't even really have classes anymore in terms of what you could call a character, because it was like, well, I take Ranger at first level, but then I take Paladin, but then I take, and like, what are you left with? It's like a guy who can do a bunch of stuff, but what do you call that in terms of like fantasy little groups? But you would get a lot of power gaming, and I, as the one running the module, felt like I was just presenting the monsters, and I had to run them in a certain way, and watching the party trounce them and going, okay, yes, that was very good, and here's your participation trophies. But sometimes people would get a little cocky, and I remember there was an experience where I'm running the tactics, and there was a wizard, and he was at level 5, and so up till now he'd been able to kind of do okay, just standing at the back of the party, right. And whatever was going to happen was whatever. But they ran into a very large statue, and the stated tactics I had to run was he uses trample to attack again. They were all in a line. I'm like, all right, well then he tramples over all of you, and he will end up standing basically on top of the guy who's at the end of the line. So boom, everybody take your trample damage, and and then they all took their actions, and fighters did whatever. Then we finally get to the wizard's turn. I'm like, okay, wizard, what is it you want to do? And the wizard's like, I'm going to withdraw and get away from the big guy. I'm like, okay, well then he swings his big fist and goes to crush you. And he's like, but wait, I said I am withdrawing. I'm like, yes, you withdrew, which means the square you are standing in is not considered threatened. However, all these other squares that you ran through, because the creature is 20 feet tall, provokes a single attack of opportunity from the wizard, who has no armor class and no hit points. I'm sorry, Blam, you're dead. And he was, and he just started like, I did not have a good time.
I understand that. Tactics done well, you can get killed, but it's But I'm with other guys. I think I get why people want to min max, and I get that feeling. I mean, I guess in superheroes that's very common, so it's not a big issue. Right. Because usually there are things to face that are equal to that. Mm-hmm. If you get a system like M&M, if you're all balanced somewhat reasonably, you can drop Superman and Batman in the same game, mm-hmm. and kind of make it level, at least with the points. Right. But you know what's going on before that happens. It's not like you picked, you picked Robin, Wonder Woman, Superman, and then I can average you off the street. It's like, that's not going to work. That just by what they've told you just to start. And I think that's kind of important. And even though people have certain levels and things, it's like a 10th level bard and a 10th level monk are not equal to a 10th level paladin and a 10th level wizard. Right. And it's I get it when you're trying to, but it's like, but it isn't. It just isn't. The numbers don't play in those favors. So
and that was the competitive group that I was involved in Los Angeles. And there's one guy, I still play with on Sundays, on the internet. But he's got a DM that's just running a game for him. And he's so good at breaking the Pathfinder system that the DM has just like, all right, the opponents are always 3 or 4 levels better, and I'm just giving them all double actions. And Rick still, beats everything because he's very good and very tactical at all of that. But back when I was playing with Rick, we were talking because that was the draw at the time, was like, oh, we can finally go to high level games at third edition. Because prior to third edition, I really didn't see any high level games, I never participated in any, but third edition was always like, oh, look, you can advance. And, they kind of had the promise of balancing out the system over a long period of time. But we discovered that wasn't true. And as Rick put it, like, look, I would rather play a 10th level wizard in a given game than a 15th level ranger.
Right.
Yeah. And that sentiment is basically true. So
it's I think that's kind of why I've been like really looking at the whole organized play concept. I like the idea of it.
Right.
And it's like, look, if you're gonna play to min max, that's what you play to that. You say, hey, this is what we're doing with this. We're 100% putting this and we're playing to that. And I don't think people want to admit that. Just like people get offended. It's like, oh, I don't want to min max. I want to tell a story. Well, then this is the thing for you. I get it.
And that's where I've been really enjoying doing the Osric stuff. So I've been I'm running Dungeon Crawl Classics. And one of the things, and this was something I did in Pathfinder. And I remember, like, God, the Pathfinder players I was playing with were just like, they were horrified when I first suggested this. I'm like, what if we just rolled 3d6 in order and that was our stats? And people are like, what? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, but no, like, it was so much fun. But that ended up being like one of the most fun campaigns we ever did.
It's nice when you can add randomness to a game. It can be a lot of fun, but so many people are. I mean, like I said, the people doing organized play, they definitely want to. It's kill monster, get treasure,
right?
And the only guys I ever thought that actually did a cool idea behind that was the guys at Paradigm Concepts, because they told a really great story, and you got to kill monsters and get treasures, but you've got a great story behind it. And I would say the same thing when they picked the idea of making sure that what you do, your actions in the adventure matter in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And like one of their favorite ones is this one creature in this one game that people played. Everybody played. It was one adventure everybody played. You had a choice. You could let this guy go, or you could have killed him.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that let them go, well, then when they had a big battle interactive, like 2 years later, this character pops up again, and they ask you, what did you do with this character? Oh, I let him go. Well, if you let him go, you got over this table. Mm-hmm. And then, like, everyone else was basically with, I guess, wooden swords and wooden armor. You got back all your armor that you had, all the stuff pristine. It was like because you did him a favor.
Right.
And it's like, oh, that's kind of, that mattered. What happened? And then later on, it very much mattered in the adventure.
Yes.
So, it's like, I like that idea. I think that's a kind of simple, brilliant idea. But they don't do that. They basically make one-off adventures where you do something quick and it's like, whatever, just forget about it. It doesn't matter. And, I think if you play it more like, oh, no, this stuff actually matters, you get more out of the players.
Yeah. Now, I mean, we've been talking about organized play and Pathfinder, which is, I don't know, is that relevant to small role-playing publishers today?
I think it is, because they have been always one of the bigger gateways for RPG publishing. I mean, everybody starts basically the same way. Mm-hmm. You get a D&D product, you want to put it together, you have a cool idea you want to do, and you want to put it out, and you just put it out. And with like DM's Guild, I'll describe it like this. Okay. DM's Guild is a great idea if you've never published anything at all.
Right.
It gives you a lot. There's a lot of stuff that, you can get products in front of a ton of people. You can get art for free, and it's great. It's really impressive. The downside is it takes time for you to build yourself a brand off of there, probably much longer than anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
I know when guys first started, they were like, they couldn't even put like their name under the creator of their product. And I would be like, well, how are you going to get known?
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's like, well, no, you keep making stuff, and then eventually people will know who you are. And I'm like, no, most people don't.
Yeah.
Most people don't care. They say it's a, cool, hey, it's a great product. I love it. Who made it? I don't remember his name. You know, it's
Right.
like because you didn't promote yourself.
Yeah,
I think
I'm
that,
even that way about like movies that I love. You know, like that was a great movie. I'm like, who wrote it? I'm like, I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah. It's like, and
Like
like
you know who starred in it,
right,
and sometimes you'll know who directed it, but the writer's way down there.
yeah. So I think that was a problem. I know I complained about it a lot. I know when I first my first 5e product I put out,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it didn't sell. It didn't sell, and you know, I had people backlash against it
Huh, that's
because
weird.
it wasn't the typical what they thought it was going to be.
Okay.
You know, and I'm always like, well, if you read what I told you it was about, you wouldn't have guessed that. Well, that's not what I wanted, but you read it, right? This is what you thought. You're like, yeah, but this is not how I wanted it. And I was like, okay. And I finally, it took me a long time to finally understand that. And then once I did, I realized, okay, then this isn't for me. I get it. I'm just going to do little conversions of things that I think that people might enjoy, and if they sell, that's great. If not, I've already made my money off them, which just profit right now, so I'm good either way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where I kind of fell back into doing superhero stuff because I mean I love superhero stuff and it makes sense to me. And the
Mm-hmm.
system being point based is I think a little smarter in the long run. And people are always like, "Well, it's not a perfect system," and I'm like, "Name me a perfect system."
So you're doing Mutants and Masterminds is your focus?
Yeah, I'm doing
Okay.
an M&M. Super powered by M&M. Their line for third party publishers,
Neat.
and they've always been very very happy to support publishers, and I've always appreciated that. I think Paizo probably being probably originally was one of the number one guys
Mm-hmm.
who did that. I mean, they talked up other people's products, their third party products, and it really got involved, and they were really just a really great company for that support. I mean, they were selling products on their website for third party guys.
Mm-hmm.
Like every was it Thursday or Friday, they talk up a third party publisher on their website. So it's like, hey, you
Yeah.
really can't beat that. And they were hiring third party guys that we'd work with, and eventually would wind up at Paizo doing something, and either get hired or just do stuff long term. And it was really kind of a wow, man, this is great. This is the best thing going. And and that kind of disappeared. So, like I said, I
Yeah,
don't.
and coming back to the Osric thing, what I was saying is that I remember hearing about it and ridiculing the notion back in the 2000s and the aughts when it's like, oh wow, now D&D is kind of open license and people can make their own D&D products. And somebody said, yeah, somebody's using it to make a clone of first edition in products. But I'm like, why would anybody do that?
Right,
But now I got to look back and go, there was a certain wisdom there because the system they were working with or tuning or whatever never changed.
right,
Whereas everybody else had to go, okay, 3 to 3.5, okay, 3.5 to either 4E or Pathfinder,
right.
now 5E or Pathfinder Second Edition, and that's a lot of changes in 20
Oh yeah,
years. Whereas if you were just working on First Edition D&D Basic,
you
you
knew what it
probably
was,
yeah, you know,
and
and I'm
I guess
seeing like some big Kickstarter numbers, you
yeah,
know,
that's another weird little factor to all this. Some of these numbers for Kickstarters, I'm like, it raised what?
yeah, like Old School Essentials, which was basically a retro clone of not advanced D&D as I understand it, but like D&D, what they call BX,
Right.
the Todd Mulvey system, the stuff in
Yeah.
the red box. Like it's that style of D&D, and it brought in like 250,000, I want to say, or more, I think.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm always amazed when anything makes any decent money in
Mm-hmm.
Kickstarter because I was there at the beginning when Garrett Skarka did Far West and it
Mm-hmm.
made $50,000, and I was like, I mean, that blew my mind when that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a couple. What was it one? Quantum, another, and both of those winded up badly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Garrett actually ever released anything, or some things he did, but not a lot for Far West. And Quantum, was my favorite of the thieving of stuff. The main writer blamed the artist for stuff not coming in, even though the artist had tons of work already pre-done. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this became a mess. And I've done 5, 6, 7 Kickstarters,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like I don't even call it Kickstarter; it's Kick Finisher.
Okay.
Because you've done all the work on it, you got it ready, and it's like really what you're doing is seeing if you can get some people to give you money quickly to finish
Right.
off stuff.
Yes.
And
If you're doing it the right way, doing it the wrong way. I mean, I was really amazed I'm sure you're aware, and maybe even have some gossip about this person, but that the Fire Mountain Games guy who did Way of the Wicked for Paizo, has that product had such a I played it. That was great. We really enjoyed it. It was like a breath of fresh air. Everybody got to play the evil person. Uh,
Oh,
and he had some cool changes to the system. I mean, they were unbalanced, but the system was already unbalanced, so who even
right.
really cared? And that was great. And then boom, now he does his sequel campaign, and he raises even more money because he's got all this love, and then he disappears.
Yeah, that I knew the guy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't say I knew him well, but I knew him well enough to know that. And for people I talked to, who knew it's like the second one was definitely straight out fraud. I mean, 100% fraud.
Oh wow, okay.
The first one was probably like it's just luck, just lightning in a bottle, happened at the right moment, the right thing, boom, boom, boom. And even I was like, that's a brilliant idea. Oh my god, that worked so well.
Yeah.
Man, oh man, that God, that ended badly. That ended badly.
Yeah.
It's the last time I saw somebody steal that kind of money was when Ossium Entertainment in the early aughts did all the distribution for the third party publishers and then ran off with their money.
See, and it's good we can at least agree on terms, because I come from the comic book side, and there are so many people, particularly amongst the group I tend to criticize, which are kind of Ethan Van Sciver and his minions, who go under the name Comicsgate. And so many of those people put out a book and just brought in like 50 grand and then nothing.
Right. I mean, to me, it's like I don't get the fraud aspect. It's like, look, you don't. If you want to do the thing, that's great. If you don't want to do it, don't fraud people, because really, I mean, it's like you're messing it up for yourself. Number one, because you're going to see the people again.
Well, I mean, the thing is that yes, it is shameful for a creator to do that. But when I would say, "Hey, where's Detective Dead?" But just this week, people finally got their copy of Red Rooster, which was due 3 years ago. And and I've been saying, like, what is up with these people? But the people were like, no, you can't criticize the creator. I'm like, yes, I can. Like, where's the book?
Look, I'll just say it once again. Once money's involved, it's not creative. It is commerce.
Right.
I like artists like anybody else would. I think artists are amazing. But if you sell your artwork, it's commerce. Right. And you got to act in that kind of field. And if you don't want to do that, that's great. But understand the repercussions of doing so. I mean, good Lord. I've been very tough on artists. Let me phrase that. I've been very tough on American artists.
Okay.
Their mindset being, oh, this is how it's always going to be. We're going to always have tons of good money. We don't have to worry about this. And I was one of those guys, in the mid 2000s who were like getting guys overseas. I used to South America and Southeast Asia. I was getting artists to do like comparable work to what you see for like a third of the price.
Right.
And I mean, I'm not going to lie. I got a lot of artwork from a lot of people really cheap. And I used that artwork for years. I mean, some of it I still use today. And it's like the price I paid for that artwork was so under what would be in America. And to me, it was like, well, how are Americans going to survive? You can't tell somebody, hey, I only do work for $200 a page.
Right.
We're not going to find a guy who does it twice as good for $50 a page.
Right. Yeah.
And then like my other part, so the other part to my special trick was look at how strong the dollar was at that point. So you'd get these positions of, hey, the dollar's really strong compared to this country's currency. I'm paying you a lot more than what you'd get from your regular one. Let's do some work together. And they'd be like, sure. And, Canada for a while was like that. I remember when the US dollar was worth like 150 Canadian. And it was, it was great. It was great. I was loving it, and those guys were loving it. But then when it, like in the 2008, when it flipped in the whole like big financial crisis in the US, they wanted to renegotiate price then. Since the US dollar, it like dropped in half. So it's like, they were like, well, no, I've got to double my rates. And I'm like, whoa. No. I mean, when you were doing it, it was okay. You made all this money, but now you're trying to get double out of me. So if it flips back, you want me to pay you even more? I'm like, that's not really going to be realistic. And so, there's some guys I had to cut from it, and some guys I made new friends. It's there's always people willing to work. You just got to find them. And once you find
Yes.
them, pay them well, they'll stick around.
That's what I do in comic books, and it's and yes, I've also observed. I don't work with American artists, and it's not because I don't like American artists. I haven't found any that I like the quality for the price.
Right.
I just
And
haven't.
and like I said, I think that's what even the
Yeah.
majors have
And
done.
the other thing about American artists is they're on social media all the damn time. And the problem is they're dropping hot takes. And if their hot takes happen to cross your hot takes, well, now they're off the project.
Right.
Whereas, somebody in the Philippines, you don't have that issue.
I had a buddy who got involved with a company that,
Uh-huh.
and I have to give him credit. They stole his art. They stole some of his art, and he got online and he blasted him for it. Which I'm like, okay, I get it, no problem.
Yeah.
But then they started saying stuff about him that I wasn't. I was like, I don't think that's 100% true.
Mm-hmm.
He might have done something like that, but I don't think he did all of that. So it just became a position of just people screaming at each other, and no matter how at fault they were, he didn't look good.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like the guy who did the Justice League movie. The guy who played Cyborg.
Yes. Ray Fisher.
Yeah, I think it's Ray Fisher. It's like, Ray, I know you had a bad experience on this thing, but stop talking about it.
Right.
We all know. We all get it. We all behind
you. I'm preparing a video, and all right. So this. All right. I was on Facebook today, and I was messaging you, and I don't go on Facebook often, but I go there to kind of do commerce, and I'm doing a Kickstarter right now. So I go on and I check my ad account. I post links around and stuff, and I saw a guy who I was probably role playing with at the convention I met you. Like I was playing with this guy in like the late '90s, and we were there for the whole transition into D&D 3rd edition. We used to play Spycraft. And I really loved, that's why I was looking at the time, like, Haven City of Violence and all that.
I'll tell you a funny story about that after this.
Okay. And, when I was on it, we used to just like, we got together and it was great and it was awesome. And like, I don't think I ever mentioned to him, or I don't think we ever had a discussion about, I'm white and you're black. But today on Facebook, I'm looking at and this is all this stuff about how white people have used Christianity to enslave black people for centuries, and it's still going, and I'm like, I don't even know if I can talk to this man. Like we used to be,
yeah,
like,
time. Yeah, it's like I'm real simple. It's like, look, just treat people nicely. That's it.
Yeah.
Just treat people nicely.
So,
that's what you got to do.
Yeah. And there's been a lot of, I think, like division and a kind of identity politics that has been in the nerd culture, because we have kind of seen it transition from, I've been going to conventions for a while.
Right.
And when I was going to conventions in the 80s, it was a bunch of white guys. And then in the 90s, there, with White Wolf, there started to be women kind of added to the scene. And then we started to kind of gradually get, I guess more minorities, I suppose the approved term. And at the time, and when I was playing with these people, I like, isn't this great? This is society working,
right.
But I now it seems like certain groups and certain segments, and it's even like certain games, you'll go like, oh, you don't want to play that game because that game, oh, that's those people are very that way, and you want to play like and some of that might come down to Osric. Like the Osric players are they're going to be maybe more like me. They're going to be probably older. They're going to be like, it's okay if your character dies, maybe less hand holding. There's like a whole subculture implied in the game system.
Well, and I'm, look, I'm a person of color. I understand it very well. I've been doing this a long time, but it's beyond that. I'm all for inclusion. Let's get as many cool things in there, but it's more of, if you don't have this, you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, well, a couple of years ago, I got into, I don't know how I call it, a disagreement. Mm-hmm. Someone told me that I wasn't woke enough. Basically, I wasn't woke enough. And I'm like, dude, I'm a 45-year-old black man living in America.
Right.
I can't not be woke. It's impossible. It's just physically impossible.
Right.
And they were treating, and I just said they were treating me like I wasn't I wasn't doing enough to look at the two wrongs.
For the cause. Yeah.
And I'm like,
right.
what the what? And it always upset me. And I was just like, and I went on a tirade about it, but I was like, I can't imagine this is even happening. But comics, I think comics have the same problem. Comics have become, it's not about, where are the villains? When I read comic books, we had villains. There were villains in comic books. Every month, you get a different little villain. When I read Avengers, 3 or 4 issues about one villain group, and then another villain group, and then another. You get that. You get that kind of interaction. But I haven't read a book with real villains in it in a while.
Are you talking about like the Jordan Peterson Red Skull thing? No,
I think that's just like whatever. I think that's just I am not a fan of Ta-Nehisi Coates. I'm not. I don't think he's a good writer for comics. I don't think he understands pacing very well. I've said that many times before. He's just not my pick. I think his Black Panther was really convoluted. I think his Captain America has been just not good. I don't think he understands the character. I think Mark Waid understands the character better than anybody I've seen in a long time. I think Mark Waid understood Captain America in probably the best you can imagine. I don't think Ta-Nehisi Coates understands him. I think, God, who am I thinking of? I think it's, I was going to call his old name, but I can't call him his old name. Gary Conway, which is Chris Priest. I think Chris Priest understands how to write really cool, very twisted, very in-depth Captain America, Black Panther, Falcon. So I think he gets it, but I don't think Ta-Nehisi Coates gets it.
I met Mr. Priest at a convention. I gave him one of my comic books. I didn't get to follow up and see if he liked it. If so, he'll probably lie to me and say he did. But I did read an interview by him though at the time when he was doing an update on Vampirella. So this was a year and some change ago, I want to say.
Right.
And there was a lot of questions about the costume is problematic and the character intersexuality and this and he was fielding no, I would not want to ride in a car with a woman dressed like that, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to tell this story. Yeah. So
it's just, it's I go back to also, this is a system we're trying to sell product, and the sales on comic books are down.
Right.
I mean, they're down, and that's also what the price, and that's another little argument later. But it's like you've got to sell books.
Yes.
It's like Marvel was going to come out with a New Warriors. And I'm a New Warriors fan from the 90s. And I was like, oh, great, another New Warriors book. I can't wait to check this out. Right. And then I saw what they presented.
What was was that Snowflake and
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And I was just like, it's like, where's your fan base for this?
Right. Yeah, I've often asked that question. But as someone who makes comic books, I'm kind of okay with it because I'm like, I buy my book. You can come buy my book.
Right. I'm just amazed that for a corporation as big as they are, for what as they are, they would have made such a calculated, foolish mistake.
Well, and it's particularly in the subculture I cover, which is the comic people and the indie comic book circuit, and that whole competing against Marvel, which is so big in pop culture, and Disney with Star Wars and The Last Jedi and all this other stuff. And here come the woke politics of Batgirl. So just the hot take YouTube and Twitters, I can give you minute to minute, going, oh, and then Ta-Nehisi Coates at this point, and then there was this thing. So yeah, I'm kind of familiar with it, but at the same time, I want to go just when you're looking at the current Marvel slate of movies, or what has been the Marvel slate of movies up till now, and then going forward, well, now they're going to transition to more what the more current storylines, call it, woke or whatever, where now Thor is now going to be Lady Thor. And I mean,
you know what? I'll say this much. I read Jason Aaron's run with the female Thor. I think he did a great job on that. I think that was actually, at first I was like, this is the dumbest thing ever. Like, it's his name. His name is Thor. How are you going to call her Thor? And then when I got him, like, oh, okay. And I think,
by the way, there's a link in the description to his YouTube channel if you want to go over and subscribe. So.
It's crazy. It's crazy over there. That guy, I'm crazy.
Yeah.
And I got to give him credit. I read his original Thor he did, which I thought was as good as Walt Simonson's run. I mean, it was like that's how you do a run. It's like you come out punching. It's like, wow, that was amazing. And the female Thor, it was executed well, but it already had restrictions on it. Like we knew she wasn't going to stay being Thor.
Right.
So it's like, okay, what did you really do? And like when they made Sam Wilson Captain America, well, we know Steve Rogers is going to come back. So what did you really do?
Right.
You know, it's like there's certain things that didn't need to change.
And I guess that is my question as I'm preparing a video. I got lost on my topic, but I'm preparing a video about Orlando Jones and the whole American Gods thing.
Yeah.
Because that's I'll just give a brief recap here. But Orlando Jones, whom I don't know at all. I have never met. I have never interacted with. My interactions with Orlando Jones is merely seeing him on a box. And back when I was seeing him on a box in the 90s, he seemed really happy. And he was saying, make 7-Up yours. And I was like, that's cute and clever and jolly. And then, he was in the movie Evolution with
right.
If it was Julianne
David
Moore
Duchovny.
And David Duchovny. And to me, looking back with the modern identity politics, I go, well, the X-Files, clearly a white show, but see, we have the X-Files star, but we have inclusion, and we're together, and Evolution was happy, and we defeated the monster, and it was just happy, right? But now we got, American Gods, and he's given these very firebrand speeches about some of the same stuff that my friend on Facebook was going off on. And then he ended up not getting picked up for season 3. And then he starts going on Twitter and tearing into the production staff.
Yeah.
And then Neil Gaiman steps in on Twitter and is like, look, you weren't in on season 3 because they're doing a section of my novel where you weren't part of it. And, I haven't heard the producer person you're referring to say the things that you're saying he allegedly was saying to his coworkers. And Orlando Jones retweets Neil Gaiman and says, your sheet is showing. And I'm like, what? This stuff is getting crazy. Like, no one is seeming to be happy. Like, for all this talk about inclusion, it's supposed to cause people to come together and be happy. I'm not.
Well, I mean, I'll say it bluntly. The inclusion has to be a certain kind of way,
right?
If you don't hate what I hate, then you're wrong. And it's like It's like, look, you don't have to love everything I do. I don't want you to love everything I do. I'm a real person. There's some things that I do that someone would be like, I'm appalled by that. I'm like, okay, that's cool. That's how you feel.
I'm with you on that one. Yeah,
but at the same time, let's just focus on telling good story. You do good work. Right. I don't care. Yeah. I don't care. But you've got to do the good work first. And I don't mean it's good work because somebody said, oh, it's SJW good or whatever. No, I want it to be good. My dream is every product I do should be like Marv Wolfman and George Perez's run on Teen Titans. Mm-hmm. It's like I'm trying to do Judas Contract every day. So people are like, yes, that was amazing. Yes. It's like, thank you.
Right.
That's what you should be focused on. But so many people are focused on, look, I understand you're going to talk about politics. That's great.
Right.
But make sure it's good.
Yes. I'm with you.
Oh, but before I forget, because I've got to tell you, this is a story that you're going to laugh at. So Spycraft.
Yes.
I had when I came out with Haven, Spycraft came out. Mm-hmm. I wanted to do a product for them badly. I wanted to convert Haven City of Violence to Spycraft. Mm-hmm. And I talked to the guys at AEG, and they always seemed interested. Like, yeah, that's something we want to do. And I'm like, well, yeah, we'll send me the license. I'll be more than happy to do it. I know that you worked with friends of mine. Never came through. Mm-hmm. Never came through. And I kept I pestered them for 3 years doing this. Mm-hmm. My buddy's got several products made by them to the license, and I kept saying, like, what is going on? I don't understand why they're not responding back to me. What's going on? So I found out later that they're like, yeah, man. They go, they didn't want you to put a product out under Spycraft. And I was like, well, why is that? He goes, well, they had a product called 10,000 Bullets they were going to do that was going to be basically head-to-head with your Haven.
Ah, there we go.
And I'm like, well, why did they just tell me that? And I mean,
exactly.
And I was like, and it drove me crazy. And the funny part is that, so I finally made Haven for D20 Modern and went on with that. And we still made money on it. I mean, it always sold well. I never had a problem with it. But I said, that was my biggest regret. I never got them to put that. And because I think, and I still believe, if I had done that for Spycraft, we would have easily made a nice little niche and probably beaten up on D20 Modern.
Right.
You know,
and that's the thing. Like when I'm doing a modern game, I basically go to GURPS because I can't think of any modern system that's out there that's supported right now.
Like I said, I didn't understand why, and I always said that was the opportunity I always missed, and I really always said I regret that because I like Spycraft, I liked what they were doing. The second edition didn't appeal to me as much, but that first
I didn't like it as much. The first edition was fun.
Yeah, I was like, this is great. I want more of this. Yeah. And and even Shadow Force Archer had some moments, but I'm like, whatever. I mean, Spycraft made it. That's what it was supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And I said I was always very mad about. I was mad about that for a long time with the guys over at AEG because I was just like, you guys led me on for 3 years for no apparent reason. I'm like, if I ever see you guys again, I'm gonna punch you in the face. That I was like, and I'm over it now. It's been 20 years, but it's just like, what a missed opportunity at something that could have been great.
Yeah. Exactly. So now you seem to have a lot of knowledge of comics, and you also clearly have a lot of knowledge of self-publishing.
Yeah, I have my knowledge of comics is quite extensive for several reasons. Mm-hmm. I've been collecting comic books for 40 plus years.
Right.
In my early 20s, I worked for a price guide called Comics Values Monthly, which was out before Wizard was. Mm-hmm. And I happened to live in a town over from where it was made. I got a job working for them, and I got very involved in the industry behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. And I got very involved with publishing because they were a publishing house. So here I am, 22 years old, talking to everybody at Marvel in the, we're talking 1993. Mm-hmm. So the good times of Marvel when there was, it was still pretty hot and books were coming out and things were going super great. Mm-hmm. I said one of my first ever byline interview, I got to interview the guys at Milestone Media. Mm-hmm. Got to go up to their offices, talk to them directly. I was like, this is amazing. And it just, just one of those kind of things. And then I'd worked at comic book stores my entire life. Mm-hmm. So like I said, I've done every job you can do related to comics, except for physically draw comics. Mm-hmm. So, and I mean, I love comics.
Have you been put out a book?
I put out one comic book inside of Haven City of Violence.
Okay.
I have a comic book I've written in my head. I've written it for the last 12 years. It's already done. Mm-hmm. Already got the names of it. I know the characters. I know the story. I know it's going to work. It's a fantasy book. I think people would love it. It's everything's perfect about it. It is 100% perfect, ready to go. I haven't found that's not true. The artist I really want to get, I can't get because he's too busy doing his own books and some other stuff. But he's the guy I want. The second guy I want, Raymond Perez, is up in Canada doing books for Marvel. So I was like, but I mean, it's like I know his style is exactly what I want. I know how it's going to look. I know how it's going to play out. What I really want to do is, find a way to add 3D and 3D animation in the background as drawings. Because I've said, and some people have been like, "That's crazy." I think 3D animation in comic books needs to be put in stuff, especially for buildings in the background. You're wasting your time having artists draw that stuff. That stuff should already be pre-made for it, and they can. I guess the colors would have to work on this and would affect the coloring and some of this stuff, but backgrounds should not be done by artists. They're wasting their time on backgrounds. Let them do the art. Let them do the premiere stuff in front. Take a shot of the background, do what you got to do, and then keep it moving. Because too many times you get like one nice background, and the rest will be empty boxes. And they're showing a scene. It's like because they don't want to put it in the background. Well, then 3D it. Have the city 3D. Have places 3D. You build it once or twice. It's built. You take the shot you need, or you have the shot available as images already saved, and people can put in the background and just keep it moving. And then once you see that, you're like, oh, okay, I want to see this. Oh, this looks. Now I get what the background looks like. This. Now I see what the build. It's like, why are we letting people waste time drawing things they don't need to draw?
Right.
It's just, and like I said, we're still doing comic books the same way we did almost in the 60s. I mean, they've stopped using actual paint on pages.
Right.
They've gone digital.
They got digital and color, yes.
But like the 3D they put on books looks like garbage. I go back to the book, comic book, the Red Star. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite 3D done books. The guys who did that books, Christopher Gossett. Christopher Gossett's claim to fame is he invented the double-headed lightsaber. You know,
Right.
okay, not a bad. You know, he drew it artistically. He's working at LucasArts.
Yeah.
And boom, they ran with it. So ta-da.
Yeah.
And you know, he had a really great understanding of how comic books should look. And this is in the early 2000s, and they were ahead of the game back then. And no one's done anything even kind of like that. And I don't get that part. I don't get the technology we have today is amazing. Why aren't we maximizing it?
Right.
Why are we still thinking two-dimensional?
Well, I mean, and this is, you know, kind of the larger question is, you know, we both have, I guess, we are both in the self-publishing business.
Yes.
But I'm making comics and you're making role-playing supplements. And I'm not sure which market is bigger. I feel like role-playing is bigger and is growing, and I feel like comics is smaller and is shrinking. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, you seem to have a knowledge of comics and a passion for comics, and some ideas about how to be innovative. I mean, I don't know how has role-playing games been a successful enough. I mean, is it a business for you? Is it still a hobby? I mean, I want to say it's a business, right? But,
you know, it's also it is a hobby that makes enough money where it can be a business.
Okay.
You know, it's. I think comic books are still the better choice because you can once you do a couple of good comic books, you're going to get people pitching you. Like Jim Zub. Mm-hmm. I know Jim Zub. I've interviewed him. He's gotten a lot of people who've seen his writing because of his independent books. He's gotten works at Marvel.
Right.
But now you can see the stuff at Marvel because he puts his names on it. Marvel book. They've come back and said, "Oh, you got your own personal stuff. We'd love to do a game with you." So I know he's got a board game they're developing in Japan based on his books. Like one of his Wayward, yeah, I think it's Wayward, Wayward, and they're developing it, and I think that's what's going to happen for comic books. Comic books will become the feeder for video games and TV.
Right. Yeah, that's how I envision it. Actually, is I've got this system where I have my characters, and I just tell everybody, like right now on Kickstarter. Link in the description, Guinevere, the Ridley Factory, issue 4. And I've got all my characters, and I've gotten a lot of them trademarked. But I'm like, if anybody wants to use them, just let me know. Just give me an attribution in the credits. Guinevere Property and Trademark Press Poulter. You can do what you want with it. I don't even have to agree with what you do. You don't need my permission. Just go.
Because people are going to see and go, oh, what else do you have?
Right. Exactly. I'm interested in making that character more popular. And making that character kind of the image or the icon of a certain thing. And
well, I'll tell you, I actually, I guess this is very common to me. It's common knowledge. Yeah. So back when I put out Haven City of Violence, I got approached by a Hollywood producer to get Haven turned into a movie.
Okay.
And I was like, yeah, whatever. Da, 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 da. But no, it was actually legit. The funny part is, God, so many funny. So, they told me what they wanted to do. I got a check.
Right.
I was like, oh, okay, free money. I'll take free money.
Right.
And nothing ever developed. It got in development hell. But the movie they made instead of Haven City Violence was Cowboys and Aliens with Harrison Ford.
So it seemed like they wanted to make something related to comics or something.
Right. And they didn't know what exactly it was. And while this was going on, I talked to, I think was it Mike Pondsmith? Mike Pondsmith. No, Mike Stackpole. I always get them confused. Oh, okay. Even though they're two different people, I get them confused every time.
Right.
Mike Stackpole told me that they want to do some stuff based on his BattleTech stuff.
I when he said Stackpole, all I could think of was his late 80s BattleTech novels.
Right. Well, Hollywood wanted to do those as movies.
Wow. All right.
And he said, oh, that sounds great. They go, hey, can we fly you out? We can talk. He's like, sure, no problem. Fly me out. No problem. So they fly him out and they're talking about the book. And they go, tell us about the book. And he starts telling them about the book. And they start.
I think like if they've contacted you and said, we want to make a movie based on your book, when you get out there, they're like, shouldn't you have read the damn thing?
No, that's the kicker. He told me they hadn't read it.
Yeah.
They hadn't read it. They basically called them out, paid them, I think it was like 10, 15 grand to tell them what was in the books. They knew they were popular, but they didn't know why. And it's like, well, did you read the book? Well, we're not going to be doing that. And it's like, And it's like, nothing ever happened to him, but he got paid 15 grand for that. They flew him out to do that. And to me, it's like, this is what's wrong with Hollywood.
Yeah.
They have so much money and no common sense. Because if you told me, oh yeah, I flew this guy out because I didn't want to read a $6.99 book, I'm gonna hit you with my baseball bat till I get tired.
Exactly.
It's like that's just that's not even stupid. That's just foolish. So I mean, I'm sorry, you couldn't work with me. That's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. And I mean, like I said, I think that was the problem. I think the other problem with comics, I go back to my same problem with comics. When I go to the comic book store and I pick up 3 comic books, 3, that's $15. There is no mother with 3 children that's going to buy 3 comic books for $15.
Right.
I'm a single parent. I understand that very easily. There's a certain amount of money I'm going to spend on comics. And the stuff I spend is in the dollar bin because I know I got to pay for other stuff. The comic book guys know this, but still they keep increasing the price up and up. And the sales keep going down lower and lower. A 15-minute comic book read should not cost more, really, than $2.50. And if they were smart, they would make them all $2.50. My genius idea for getting kids to read comic books. Here it is. And I'll use Marvel. It could be any major company, but this is it. So what you do is you break it down. You're going to tell 18 issues worth of story. 6, 6, and 6. So it can eventually be traded as 6. No. You get the first act will be meeting the characters. You get to see all the stuff in the first 6 issues. And they get some villains. Second one, more battle, bigger stuff. Third one, big super battle. At the end of the 18 issues, you're going to reissue the issues back at number 1. You're going to start with another number 1. Same exact book. The interior is exactly the same. 100% the same. The cover will be different. That's it. And these books are going to keep running. And you're going to make these books relatively cheap. You're going to try to get these books down to $1.99 if you can. And you're just going to reprint these books. Every 18 months, you're going to reprint these books from the start. So when new people come to the store who know nothing about comics and don't understand something, they need to get something for their kid. If you're Marvel, you go, here's our Marvel line. Grab these. These are great. Because honestly, kids are going to stay in comic books maybe a year if you're really lucky. But if you do 18 months, 18 books, they're not going to get the same book twice. And you restart them again, it doesn't cost you anymore. You're just reprinting the same book with a different cover. I mean, the retailers understand what it is.
Why wouldn't you just be doing this with trade paperbacks and be like, Spider-Man, here, use these 6 trade paperbacks.
Because trade paperbacks are still too expensive. If I can get the cost for these floppies down to like $1.99, I can sell them to mothers with 3 kids. I can sell 3 kids for $6. No one blinks an eye. No one thinks. 3 comic books for $6. No one's fighting over them. You get a trade. One kid gets it. One kid doesn't get. Oh no! Oh my God, that'll drive you crazy. Single mom knows 3 comic books, $6. I'll boom. That's worth it. And the best part is, if Marvel had any kind of brains, or if any of those guys had any kind of brains, you put something highly educational with it. You do like reading is fundamental, or you do educational stuff. You make it with that, so you can save. You get a couple grants for doing that. So now you're teaching kids how to read, and you're reading fun books, and they're reading fun stuff, and they're getting to know your characters. And then maybe eventually you'll get a cartoon. You do like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You have the same characters, but you do different versions of the cartoon. And every generation or every 5 years, they get a new version of it, and they still get to enjoy it. And they still love it. And it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't cost them any more to do. It doesn't cost them any more to do. It gets cheaper actually over time. And if you make it on newsprint, it's better.
I'm not in the position of Marvel and DC, and I certainly can't be concerning myself with how I'm going to get children to read comics by pricing them super low. First, I would have to somehow get distribution and shelf space in all the comic book stores before I even entertain this problem. But,
here's the best part. I wouldn't even think about stores anymore. I would be going like Walmart.
Right.
And here's the crazier part. And this I got told this by Chuck Dixon. This blows my mind.
Okay.
Libraries want to buy trades.
Yes.
Because they have tons of money to spend on trades. But most times comic guys don't go to them. They just get, they have a couple of people who go, I'll grab these. Just grab a bunch. But you can go to them directly and be like, hey, I have books and I'd love to get them in your library. And oh, sure, we'd love to do that. That's like the new thing. And Chuck told me that 12 years ago. And still people have not really reached out to this. I mean, manga and mainstream. The indies are still like, no, dudes, reach out to them. They have money for that kind of stuff. They should be focused on them. They should forget about, sounds horrible to say it, forget about Borders and Amazon and that kind of garbage. Go to the libraries. There's a library everywhere.
Yeah.
They can read your books over and over. If you become very, very popular, they'll buy you and support your other stuff. And people will hear about it in Hollywood. Like, have you heard about this book? My son found it from the library. It's really good. Oh my, that's all you got to do.
Right.
But people don't do that. So I'm like,
I like it.
Ugh.
It's a good idea. See, I got a good idea out of this. So, all right. Well, I mean, it sounds like maybe you are telling me that you should be transitioning into making comic books. Then
I'm always transitioning to making. I always will. I love the marketing side, so I love that kind of a business. So,
and I told you about my project I'm putting out.
Yes.
Yeah. So I haven't told my general audience yet, but I want to put together the intersection of a comic book, a D&D module, and miniatures. And I'm thinking like my ideal customer is going to be, kind of like the older, more Osric-y people, because I'm looking at the material from this 1981 thing. I'm like, well, it automatically lends itself, and it's got this kind of fetishy thing. I tend to make comics with sexy ladies. It's not unique to me. I've noticed that, as have many other comic publishers, when you put sexy ladies on covers, people, particularly men, buy them. So, like a comic book, a D&D module of miniatures, and then that was what prompted my discussion with you, was to try and get somebody to help out with the module part.
Well, I know it's like I mean, Paizo has done that with their comic books. All their comic books come with character stuff and games to play for the role playing, and they know why. Because they want their fan base who is a role playing to pick it up, and it's like, oh wow, cool. It ain't rocket science. We're not splitting atoms here,
right? So it seems like an attractive bundling, and
yeah. I mean, anything you can add to a book where people get more value, and then you can get a totally different source of income, because there are some people who buy role playing who've never read comics, which I don't even understand what that means. I don't. But there's some people who are like that. So why not hit them all up? Why not hit every angle you can get to?
And my Dallas friends, I get together for, really it started as like a CCG group, but then it's kind of transitioned into being a role-playing group. And I would be like, hey, I got my Kickstarter for my comic book. We don't like comics. I'm like, do you like stories? They like stories. They just buy it. It's got a story in it. Yeah, but we don't like comic books. Crazy.
Yeah. But then you find a writer. I mean, we did this for my books for Neo Exodus. We found a writer to do ebooks. I want to test it out and see what it was like. And the guy wrote a great story. The guy's written other stuff for for all the professional people. So I got him for a relatively good rate. And he was like, hey, he's like, hey, I like the characters. I like writing it. I was like, oh, this is great. It was a fun experience. Right. Did we make back our money? No. But did I learn something? Oh yeah. I get why ebooks do well. I think if that's something you want to do that. Ebooks are, 99-cent ebooks. You may not make your money back, but you can build a fan base if you put enough of them out. So, we put out, I can say 6 different ebooks. 6 or 4, something like that. I can't even remember anymore. And it was, I found it to be interesting. I knew that people have read them. We didn't get a big enough fan base because I think you're a small company. But if I continue to put out more stuff, I think, we would have gotten people going, oh, what's this? Oh, he has 70 books in the line. Oh, it must be good. Let me check them out.
Well, let me ask you like the flip side then. So, all right. What is your primary publishing platform? Do you do crowdfund mostly, or what do you do?
I guess I'd say I've tried them all. Anything that's done, anything new, I've tried it. Kickstarter, I've tried PDF sales, ebooks, digital comic books. The platform where it sells doesn't matter to me. I don't care. Just understand what the platform is, work on it, develop it, sell there. I was on Instagram for a while, understanding that for my real estate stuff, and I got it. And then, of course, the pandemic hit, and I had to pull some stuff back. But then I was like, okay, I can't do the stuff on. I would usually have done it on Instagram. Boom, let's throw out YouTube. Or actually, let's throw out Patreon first. Okay, I'm working on Patreon again. I get it. I like it. Okay, let's get YouTube going, and let's work them together and see what happens. And so I think everything you do, you can move in other places. You don't have to be like it's only one thing and it only works here. No, it works everywhere. Just try it. Just the worst thing that could happen is it doesn't work out. Well, then you learn something new. But if it works out, you've got a new source of income of revenue.
Okay, well, I'm going to suggest then that you maybe think about bundling comic books with some of your RPG stuff.
There
could be cross pollination between.
I'm trying to figure out. Well, I know there's a way you can do it digitally. Drive Through RPG sells digital comic books, and they sell Valiant.
Yeah.
So, and I've wondered, it's like, why aren't you guys bundling stuff across stores?
Right.
It's the same store.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. And when I check on my publisher account, it's all three. It's
right.
Drive Through RPG, Drive Through Comics.
Yeah. It's one bookshelf. It's just like we're going to put it over here. Well, then let's grab stuff that makes stuff together. I still think this is something that's highly controversial.
Okay.
I think that you should get publishers, a certain level publisher should be able to make a bundle out of a higher publisher's product. Like I can go to Wizards and be like, oh, you have a product that I made a supplement for, I'm going to bundle it together. Now you may not be able to change the bundle price for Wizards, but you can definitely check your bundle price and maybe see if people want to join in together or get a bunch of people together on a certain bundle for this. Like maybe you've got to have 4 companies that work together to get a bundle to get with this, and we'll give you that.
And I gotta say, like bundles, in my latest Kickstarter, I really started to embrace bundling. Like I wasn't like, because at this point I've done 9 comic books, and they've got variant covers, and I'm like, that's a bunch of SKUs. So instead of like all the different parts, it's like, would you like the 7 variant covers of White Lily? Or perhaps you would like the 6 variant covers I did for Guinevere issue 3. Like they're just bundles, and people just grab them, and and they like that. So.
And I mean, especially digitally speaking, it's like, you should. I mean, if if it's a PDF, bundle it with other stuff. Mm-hmm. My thing is you got to have at least 3 products in bundle, but after that, just keep adding more to the bundle.
Yeah,
someone will have bought that bundle when it was like 2 or 3 things. And now you add another thing to the bundle, you lower the price, they get the new product you just put out, part of the bundle, a little cheaper. But it doesn't matter because they've already bought your other 4. So they're going to buy the rest.
Right.
People, I don't think people they don't think like the people who are buying the products. They talk like they're going to, it's like, oh, well, my fan base, like, no, think about your fan base. Think about really what your fan base is doing. If they're willing to give you money, you gotta ask them questions like, why did you give me money?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like, did you like this? Is this horrible? Does this suck? What do you want to see more of? Because I can write stories I want to write all day long, and it'd be great for me, but you may not, like my favorite joke. I did a role-playing game book on dogs.
Okay.
That's it. For D20 Modern, dogs.
All right.
Did I sell a ton of those? No. But I made it for myself. I want to do something on dogs, so I made it.
If you would have done it on My Little Pony, I think you'd have made a fortune.
See, once again, I don't like My Little Pony. I like dogs.
Okay, there you go. All right.
Yeah. I picked the thing I like.
Yeah.
And, sometimes that can happen. You get into this whole, I like this.
Right.
But, it's about making good business products and making things that excite me.
So with like a Labrador class?
No, we had like different types of dogs. Different types of dogs have different types of effects. Large dogs are scary. You can also train dogs. They'll be able to do stuff. And it's like they have certain actions. Dogs are smart. So it's like, and it's like your sidekick, but it's a dog. Once again, no one had done it. I don't know why.
Okay.
But I had.
You did it.
Oh, I had to. Yeah.
All right. Well, cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I've been enjoying and I want to say, you talk with Chuck Dixon, so I feel like we're kind of fishing out of some of the same pond.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Comics have a lot of interaction, so I'm not surprised. I
feel like if I told you like certain people were bad, and you asked Chuck Dixon, he would agree that that's a pretty good list of bad actors in and around the indie comics community.
I'll tell you something. I didn't know this about Chuck when I met him, but I learned over time. Chuck is a super hardcore Republican.
Yes.
And I was always like, what? He's like, yeah. And I was like, really? He's like, dude. But
Yeah.
I'm like, but you write so many liberal characters. Like, yeah, but writing is writing. And it's like, right there, that's the moment, you know. But he'd
Right.
also had some issues and running with guys at DC about the politics.
Mhm.
And I'm like, dude, he writes well. What is, I don't, we don't have to agree for him to write well for me.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I look forward to having you on my channel in the future.
Well,
And
thank you so much for having me. I really do
yeah,
appreciate it.
no problem. And again, there's a link in the description. You can go and subscribe to his channel. And I have been noticing you've been talking about comic books lately and
Don't
some
worry,
pop culture stuff.
I'm going to be talking about artists and pay rates soon. So
Yeah, I
lots of
saw
fun.
that. Yeah, that's. I'm like, wow, I need to share some of this content with my audience because these are interesting discussions.
Oh, it's
I saw one like, all right, so this was an interesting one. If you know that the guy didn't pay his artist, should you back his Kickstarter?
yeah.
Tell me
Dude,
about that. Okay.
that was controversial. Yeah, because I mean, you know, if you don't pay people, how
Yeah.
can I give you money? And it's like he's already at like I think 350 last time I saw.
Okay.
But I don't know if he's going to pay his people.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a fraud just waiting to happen.
Exactly. And that's where it gets kind of messy. But yeah, I would like I want to work towards, and I appreciate you saying there were certain people you could put me in touch to help me with the get the module thing hammered out because you know, I mean, I feel like I could do it myself, but at the same time, I feel like I might benefit from a more experienced hand uh,
You know,
with that.
there's always people out there willing to work, and the RPG industry is always actually full of a lot of creative people. So I think we can definitely
Okay.
find some good people that you'll be
Awesome.
very happy with.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in, everyone. Good night, Big Steve. And this has been Press and Pulse with Pocket Jacks Comics, joined by Louis Porter over there. And thank you very much for your time, everybody. Take care. Good night.